Hey guys, Rebel Legend 95, recording live from the Little County Prison Cell. A, don't mind any background noise you're hearing. And it's basketball season. And B, uh, I need a palate cleanser for not having done any episodes for a little bit, like I said I would. And as you should know by now, if you're one of the handful of people who watch my channel, then you'll know that when I need something that just refresh me and bring me back into it, I do a Pokemon fight because Pokemon to me is probably one of the most interesting things to put into a death battle scenario because it's really cool to apply the in-game mechanics to a real world like a real world scenario. And B, I'm just a really big fan of Pokemon and I know it really well, so it's really easy to flex the information. Um, and this was something I'd been meaning to do for a while. It was a Pokemon character versus a fighting game character. So without further ado, here we have Riptor from Killer Instinct making a return appearance, apparently, and Genesect from the Black and Unova region of Pokemon. Um, so this is kind of like two creatures brought back from prehistoric times to be killing machines. Um, so I try not to just pick legendaries. Like I'm not just gonna do a fight with every legendary. There has to be some significance, and technically Genesect, I don't even know if that's technically a legendary. I think that's like event. That's like Jirachi or some shit. It's not necessarily the one for Gen 5, but you know what I mean. It's just legendaries tend to have more story to them and more like actual character to them, whereas I'm just basing the idea of of the Pokemon in any other case. Um, but there were some fights I wanted to. I have done fights like that. I've done like what I do, Gengar versus King Boo once. I'll link that in the description. Um, but I wanted to do some other ones, but just nothing came to mind immediately. Um, but anyway, so Riptor versus Genesect. So I'm gonna start out with Riptor just because kind of easy into it. So Riptor is technically not a raptor. It's like but it's a combination. She, I should say, is a combination of several different genus of dinosaur or different species of dinosaurs, um, but also enhanced and with Ultratech technology, right? So the doctor who raised Riptor actually wanted to have um, something that didn't require constant maintenance like Fulgore and Kilgore did, but also wanted to not have to spend like years and years in R&D to actually develop and decode the already exist the alien technology. So wanted to use something that it could use the current technology it had access to, but not have to constantly repair and reprogram every time it went out into a fight. So basically, it needed a killing machine that could learn and that could think and adapt on its own, right? And to him, he thought the best example of that would be a dinosaur. And he's not particularly wrong because Riptor is a very, adept killer, especially when you consider that he's implanted it with an almost human ability to think and learn. Which some people would argue that raptors or dinosaurs already had, but that's neither here nor there. And after some trial and error, he finally came up with what we know as the modern example of Riptor. So, in addition to having the strength that would be actually greater than the strength that would be in a raptor or a similarly sized dinosaur, Riptor is able to pull a car. It's able to jump several times its body, its height in the air. It's able to run it. Well, I mean, raptor is more than likely. I keep saying it's a raptor. It's technically not a raptor, but I'll just keep calling her a raptor. You know, raptors probably could run several times faster than people, but in addition to all of the superhuman attributes just by the physiology, we have the enhanced attributes and enhanced technological aspects to it, like plasma claws, like being able to breathe fire, being able to spit acid, or in many cases, fiery acid. Yeah, it's actually very, it's just very super adept, and and it will also eat people, and that's actually the primary reason that they implanted a cannibalistic gene into it, or a human eating gene into it, because they said that it could, that way they wouldn't have to keep feeding it, because it would just sustain itself off its victims. But yeah, so Riptor became the ultimate killing machine, taking on the likes of TJ Combo, taking on the likes of a pack of Riptor, even being able to hunt down and kill a rogue or defective Fulgor at one point in time. And I believe it's also taken on people like Jago and stuff. So, it's no slouch. And then it's the last noteworthy ability, and I'll explain why this is noteworthy later. Is I think this is a game mechanic. It's not exclusive to Riptor, but it's Instinct, I believe it's called. I don't know if there's another name for it. I think it's just called Instinct. Um, where Riptor's it's like a rage mode where basically Riptor's able to double its speed, double the speed of its projectiles firing, double its, increase its jump to be, not multiple times higher, but increase its jump to be higher, et cetera, which is not only significant to Riptor specifically because, it makes sense that a dinosaur would have the ability to, like, a rage mode like that. Like, why would I guess a robot. And didn't they do something like that for TJ Combo? Like, didn't they do that where he had access to the rage mode? So I guess technically all Killer Instinct characters have that, or it might just be a few. I'm not actually too sure. But I'll bring that up later. So moving on to Genesect. So Genesect was originally a kind of like prehistoric insect Pokemon that was known as being one of the greatest hunters in history. That Team Plasma, for their own means, whichever source you're going by, this is kind of constant. Brought back in the same vein as Mew and or Groudon, or they've done that a lot, honestly. And but then this time they kind of like dipped its exoskeleton in metal and turned it into a robot battle tank, thus creating the being known as Genesect. So Genesect is a bug steel type, making it 4 times weak to fire, making it immune to poison, giving it a lot of resistances and only a handful of weaknesses. And its ability download lets it analyze its opponent and increase one of its attack stats depending on whichever one of its opponent's defense stats is weaker. So in real world application, it would probably be like a structural integrity analysis or something that would be like, okay, I can see that this thing is weak to energy based attacks or something, so I'm going to increase the power of my energy based attacks, right? So it would be like a pre-program. It would be like a part of its programming, probably. Or vice versa. If it's weak to physical attacks, it would increase its physical attack. And as far as moves it can learn, it's actually pretty straightforward. It learns, it has things like Zap Cannon, but that's a very unreliable move. Very, it has in game. It has a very low accuracy, but it's considered it's implied that it's just a very slow moving projectile, which is why it's very inaccurate. It learns some sound based moves like metal sound and screech and whatnot. Um, it does learn things like what was it? It learns things like really niche moves like simple beam, which turns it's the opponent's ability to simple, which in competitive is important, but it and simple is just an ability that like doubles any stat changes that are applied to you. So whatever that. But and then its signature move is Techno Drive, which is a very high powered beam that changes on depending on which item it has. Which, to be fair, um in the case of fairness, we probably wouldn't give it one, a specific or at least access to all of them. Um so it would just be a normal move and it wouldn't get any stab on anything and it wouldn't like, get any specific typing. But it would still be a good move, a powerful move to use in its own right. Aside from that, it is capable of high speed flight, which is very significant. And it is just it's a very high statted Pokemon, but it has lost to a lot of, because I'm using the anime as a point of reference here, because there's actually not that much story to it in the games. Um, but if you look at, like, for instance, a team of Genesect was able to fight, Mewtwo, and pretty much have Mewtwo on the ropes until, Mewtwo just decided to Mega Evolve and then just fucking wipe the floor with them. So, that, like, but being able to fight Mewtwo, I think, is pretty significant. So, going into the analysis here, Fulgore, or not Fulgore, damn it, Riptor has some things going for her, right? Being able to breathe fire is huge because, Genesect is 4 times weak to fire. It's significant, not just weak to fire, it's significantly weak to fire, right? Um, and but other than that, there's not really too much going for it. The one thing I wanted to bring up with Instinct being relevant is that Genesect happens to know Simple Beam, and if we're using the point of reference for in-game mechanics, Simple Beam, kind of like giving the ability Simple, which is more like a condition, really, to Riptor that would kind of, and if Riptor happens to use Instinct, that would actually quadruple Riptor's running speed and projectile speed instead of doubling it, which is actually kind of cool. But that is a very niche situation because um, not only would Genesect have to decide to use Simple Beam, but Riptor would also have to go into Instinct not knowing that would happen, under the effects of Simple. So, it's interesting. It's possibly noteworthy, but it's not a determining factor because it is just so specific. Other than that, I mean, the fact that Genesect has high speed flight is kind of, a death nail in and of itself because, you know, even though she has projectiles and whatnot, Riptor has to fight up close to really have any chance of winning this. I think if Genesect sat there and let Riptor kill it, then she could. But that's kind of the other factor is like the scale of opponents. Like, okay, a pack of Riptor were able to hunt down and kill a Fulgore, which is crazy because like Full Course, this shoots laser cannons and stuff. Not too dissimilar to Genesect, but I'm not going to say that Full Course at the same power level as Genesect. A team of Genesect were able to, basically beat down a Mewtwo. Now, reminder, Mewtwo can blow up an entire island and can lift several hundred tons of Pokemon into the air with its mind. Now, there are some things to consider, like Genesect has a type advantage, is double resistant to Psychic, actually. So, like, Mewtwo's abilities wouldn't be very significant against it. And in the anime, Mewtwo relies a lot on mind control, and Genesect technically doesn't really have a mind to control. It just kind of runs on instinct. So, you could argue that Mewtwo not only was outnumbered, but was also, had a disfavorable matchup. But still, being able to fight a being that can just blow up an island, even taking on 1/5 of that power, or a fraction of that power, depending on how many Genesect there were, I think probably qualifies Genesect to be able to beat Riptor in this case. Because, like, what's Riptor's greatest strength feat? It's probably pulling a car, like fetching a car, like carrying it, and being able to jump really high in the air against something that flies, by the way. Yeah, I just think there is some things going in Riptor's advantage, but not enough to actually counteract the huge disscaling of this fight, I should say. It's like the advantages Riptor have kind of evens it out a little bit, but this is kind of an unfair fight. Like, and I don't want to say it's a legendary Pokemon, so it should be able to like blow up the planet or something. Like, that's just not true. Genesect, compared to most other legendaries, is actually very, very weak. It's not, like controlling the weather. It's not making volcanoes erupt. It's not, like balancing the forces of good and evil or anything. It's just a dinosaur bug with a mech suit on. Like, it's not actually that astronomically powerful. But regardless, I think it's still more than powerful enough to actually beat Riptor. So yeah, I'm gonna give it to Genesect. But anyway, this was really fun, and I'm not gonna promise that I'm gonna do another episode in another week or something, but I'm gonna try to put something together. So anyway, Ripple 95. See ya.